I did a video before about the 8 steps of real estate. This is step number 3. Today we're talking about 12 ways to get and structure deals. But instead of just reading this list, I'm going to spice it up a bit, and I'm going to pick this lock, and I'm going to see how many times I can pick it before the video's over. Knowing these dozen or so ways to structure deals is going to be the difference between you making millions of dollars in real estate or making a lame 10 to 20% on your money. No matter how you find your real estate deals, once you find them, you got to know how to make these offers and how to structure the deal. And structure is more important than getting a low price. Okay, getting right into it, we're going to talk about the very first way to acquire properties. A totally jerk way and a lame way to go is to inherit properties. That's not true. I'm jealous. Congratulations. So moving on to number 2, because there's not a whole lot to talk about. The second way to acquire properties is with cash or a loan or traditional hard money or private money lender. That's lame because there's not a lot to talk about. Actually, half of these are lame and half of these are cool. They progressively get better as we go. The next way to acquire properties is through short sale. If you don't know what a short sale is, this is when a lender, say, owes $100,000 and you make them an offer for $80,000. They accept that offer. They need to go to the bank and talk to the bank and have the bank agree to lower that principal on their mortgage or their loan down below that asking price so they can sell the house. Back in 2008 through 2012, this was one of the biggest strategies to buy houses. But there's not a lot to structure in these because once you get the approval from the bank, you either have to pay cash or get a loan. So there's not a lot to talk about there. The fourth way to acquire properties is through tax lien sale. This is when the government has a property tax lien on your property that you didn't pay. Somebody will come in, another investor, and buy that property from the government, cash out the government, and they take over their interest and they foreclose on you and take your property because you didn't pay your taxes. This is the saddest way to lose a property and some of the best ways to acquire properties, but it's not very reliable. You're relying on that person not to pay their taxes, so it's not a great strategy overall as a general rule for growth unless you have lots of money to play with. The fifth way to acquire properties was more popular and more advantageous to do back in the day and is still popular today but less advantageous because there's so many people on it, and that is through the auction. There's several different types of auctions. You've got the foreclosure auction, you've got the tax lien sale auction, you've got estate auctions, and you've got auctions like eBay, eBayauction.com, and others. The sixth one is a little bit like the tax lien sale where it's a little bit unreliable. This is where you are a lender on the property and the person that's living in the property does not make their payments and you have to foreclose on them. You can actually acquire a property through foreclosure as the lender. You can either do this by creating a note or buying a loan from another party. Let's say grandma and grandpa sold their property to somebody on seller finance. An investor may come in and offer grandma and grandpa 75% of that loan balance to take over that loan from them so they can go on and live their retirement years. And now that investor's got this lien on the property or this mortgage, and if that person ever doesn't pay, they can come in and they can foreclose on that property, take it back, and resell it on the open market. Acquiring properties this way isn't as awesome depending on the state you're in because when you go to resell it, oftentimes you have to pay any overages above what is owed back to the borrower. The seventh way to buy properties is through option. You can go to a landowner or a house owner and say, hey, here's $3,000. I would like the option to buy your house within the next 5 years for X price. Or I want the option to have the first right of refusal when you go to sell this house for the next 5 years. And you give them their $3,000 and you can record that against the title and you can acquire properties that way. That can be a great structure in certain circumstances and developers use this quite a bit. This is great if there's going to be some kind of value change to the property in the next couple of years. Maybe you're coming in, you do a zoning change, maybe you know there's a freeway coming through that area and it's going to increase the values of the property, or there's going to be some kind of employment center. You can lock in a price now and pay it later. Literally any of these strategies could make you a millionaire if you focused on it. There's so many different avenues in real estate that you could focus on. You just got to pick one and just be the best that you can in that area and go for it. And the next strategy is one of my favorite ways to sell properties, but not one of my favorite ways to buy, but it is a way to buy, and that is through rent to own or a lease with the option to buy. A rent to own is where you live in the property, you pay your rent, and a portion of that rent goes towards your future down payment or goes towards the purchase price in the end. A lease with the option to buy is very similar to that. The way we structure it though, we don't give them any credit towards their future down payment. We just lock in the price. There's an option agreement over here that locks in the price like we talked about before. And in the meantime, they're just renting the property. The reason this is one of my favorite ways to sell is you can make 2 to 3 times the amount you would make on that same property if you were to do a flip by doing a lease option. I'll explain on one of my next couple videos on how that works. And this can be done in every state. However, back in the early 2000s, Texas got their butt hurt, so they made it really complicated to do these. So I probably wouldn't advise doing it in Texas, but any other state, I would advise it. Okay, now this next one would be my favorite, except for it's just so dang hard to find. And there's reasons for that, and I'll do a deep dive into this specific one because it's so cool. And when you can find them, they are absolutely the best. And that is owner financing. I mean, there's thousands of different ways to structure owner financing deals. A couple of the top ones are contract for deed. This is also known as agreement for deed in other states. There's several different terms for it. But the concept is, once the agreement and the contract is fulfilled, at that point, sometime down the road, the deed is transferred to the borrower. A more traditional way to do it is to sell the property and transfer the deed right away, and then the seller gets a deed of trust or a mortgage or a lien attached to the property, and if for some reason they don't pay, they have to foreclose. And this next way is my favorite way to buy properties because it's a little easier to get than the owner finance, but it's still got a lot of the benefits. And that's taking properties subject to the existing mortgage. Now, don't let that confuse you. It's just a fancy way to say somebody's going to sell me a property and they're going to give me a deed, and the liens and the mortgages and the deeds of trust that are attached to that property and secured by that person's credit are still in place. I just take over ownership and possession of the property. They're still responsible for the mortgage, even though I may make their monthly payments for them. And again, I'll do a deep dive video into how to do subject to shortly, but I want to let you know this is one of my favorite ways to buy properties. Another way to acquire properties that I've done before is to trade properties. This is a little hard to do. It's very hard to do, to find somebody that wants what you want and has what you have. And there still are tax implications, but it's really cool when you can do it. And these next four, I'm just gonna go through really quick. We got 1031 exchange as a way to structure a purchase, and it has its own set of rules. And the reason it's lame is because there's not a whole lot I can talk about. Not a whole lot you need to know. You just need to call a 1031 exchange qualified intermediary, and they will walk you through the whole process. Another way to acquire properties is through a REIT. Buying into a real estate investment trust where you get a small portion of the portfolio that this REIT is acquiring. Another way to structure deals is a syndication deal. This is where one investor will take charge and gather up a bunch of other investors, bring in the money, do some kind of project, and you as an investor get a small portion of the deal, or you're the syndicator and you get an override on this stuff that goes on. Another way to acquire properties is to build one from scratch. Although you still have to buy the land, it's a little bit different, so I thought it was worth mentioning. And so that's it. That's my dozen or so different ways to structure real estate deals. And if you really get competent at all these different things and you're presented with a deal, this can be more valuable than just getting a low cash offer. Depending on how you structure this, it can be great.